So Brandon Aiyuk officially requested a trade today, so I wanted to make a quick video just sharing my thoughts on the whole situation. We're also going to take a look at teams with enough salary cap space to realistically pull off a trade for Brandon Aiyuk and talk about some of his best landing spots if the Niners do decide to honor that trade request. Now, will they honor that trade request? I don't know, because we saw T. Higgins a couple months back request a trade twice. If you guys don't remember, T. Higgins requested to be traded from the Bengals 2 times this offseason, and I think they just completely ignored him. So it's one thing to request the trade. It's another thing if the team does honor it, but we're going to talk about the hypothetical situation of Brandon Aiyuk not being a 49er next year. And the reason why I haven't really done much Brandon Aiyuk coverage, this whole situation, I haven't really talked about it a lot, because I always felt no matter what happens through the negotiations, whether he gets tagged or all that, I just always felt like Brandon Aiyuk, no matter what, was going to play for the 49ers next year. I just thought from a team standpoint, it's kind of crazy to let go of Brandon Aiyuk, especially whenever you're all in this next year for the Super Bowl. Basically, their window is until they pay Brock Purdy. So for me, if I'm the 49ers, I'm going all in. I'm not letting any of my players walk away or trade away any of my great players. I mean, you look at what the Rams did when they won the Super Bowl. They pushed all the money. They pushed the bill down the road. They had a stacked team. The Saints tried it as well, in Drew Brees' final years, where you really push the bill down the road. Now, I don't claim to be some salary cap expert or all that. And like I said, we're going to get into teams with salary cap space. But if I'm the 49ers, especially with how good this team is, you've been to the Super Bowl multiple times over the past couple of years, just not quite able to get it done, you can't let Brandon Aiyuk go. It fundamentally changes the construction of this offense. I love Debo. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL, but we know in terms of being a pure wide receiver, I don't think he's even close from a talent perspective, Brandon Aiyuk. I mean, Debo could literally not get open in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. Brandon Aiyuk is definitely the best vertical threat. I think the most important player in the pure passing game for the 49ers. He's such a valuable piece to this offense. I just think it'd be a brutal mistake to let him go. And I can't knock Brandon Aiyuk for wanting to get paid. That's a weird thing I've seen online, is like people saying he's an asshole or something. Like, I don't know how you could ever have that opinion of a guy who wants to get paid, especially in a profession where they don't have a very long run time, Your average NFL career, I think, is like 3 years. And for the star players, they usually last like 8 to 10 years. So I'm not knocking Brandon Aiyuk at all. Go get your money. Go find a team that will give you your money if it's not going to be the 49ers. So let's go in now and take a look at the teams with cap space and talk about some places he could actually end up if it's not with the Niners next year. Like I said earlier, I'm no cap expert, so if you are a cap expert and these numbers look off to you, you can let me know down in the comments. I'm just going off this graph I found on overthecap.com where it breaks down each team's available cap space. And we all know Brandon Aiyuk is basically seeking a $30 million annual contract, so a team would have to have at least $30 million. Maybe they could have a little less, but they could do like some cap manipulation. So let's take a look at some of these teams that could potentially land Brandon Aiyuk and have the space to do it. The team with the most cap space being the New England Patriots with $43.7 million. I don't see this happening. The New England Patriots are in a complete rehaul. It could make sense from the standpoint of we just brought in our new franchise quarterback. We want to give him a stud, legit option. But Gerard Mayo feels like a continuation of the Bill Belichick type of culture, type of system. And that system does not prioritize giving up a bunch of capital for a wide receiver. I know Bill traded for Randy Moss, but that was only one time he did that. And Randy Moss, obviously, his value was at an all-time low when the Patriots got him. You'd have to give up a significant amount to bring in Brandon Aiyuk. I heard, now don't take my word on this, but I've heard rumors that the 49ers were asking teams for like 2 first-round picks for Brandon Aiyuk, which I think is fucking crazy. I don't think any team in the NFL right now would give you that. That's what like Devontae Adams went for, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't Devontae 2 firsts, maybe a second? Like, I like Brandon Aiyuk, but he's nowhere near what Devontae was when he was traded from Green Bay. I think a realistic return for Brandon Aiyuk would just be a straight-up a first-round pick, maybe a couple of seconds and a good player. But that would kind of be my guess, is 1 first-round pick straight up for Brandon Aiyuk. That's how they traded DeForest Buckner back when they wanted to get him off the team for salary reasons. They traded him straight up to the Colts for a first-round pick. Will they do that with Aiyuk? I don't know. But like I said with the Patriots, they're continuing that Belichick culture and hiring Gerard Mayo. I don't see them giving up a big asset to bring in Brandon Aiyuk. Even though it could make sense to help out Drake May, it just goes against what the Patriots culture is. The Commanders are definitely an interesting one. They're a complete new regime, new GM, new head coach, new quarterback. They completely restarted their franchise this offseason, and I think that they are trending in the right direction. I really like Jaden Daniels. They already got him a nice weapon in Terry McLaurin, but if they just want to double down on that and bring in Brandon Aiyuk, and we've also seen Brandon Aiyuk and Jaden Daniels, it looks like they're buddies or something. They had a couple social media posts together. So I don't actually hate this fit. And the Commanders are one of those teams I think you should watch out for as a sleeper this year, because they actually have a better roster than most people would think. As much as I think the Dan Quinn hire is not a needle mover, I think Dan Quinn is, he's better than at least 10 coaches in the NFL right now. Dan Quinn has experience. He's been to a Super Bowl as a head coach. The Commanders, they're a very interesting team. If Jaden Daniels works out, they could be a really fun team. And building around Jaden Daniels with already having Terry, but then also adding Brandon Aiyuk, that could be a joy to watch. So that's actually a realistic landing spot for me. The Cardinals, I just think they have too many issues to invest a first-round pick in Brandon Aiyuk. And they just invested their 4th overall pick in Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, my philosophy in today's NFL, you can never have enough weapons. So I wouldn't have a problem trading for Aiyuk if I'm the Cardinals. But number one, I don't think the Niners would ever trade him to an in-division team like Arizona. And number two, Arizona's roster is just so bad outside of Kyler and Marvin Harrison and Budda Baker. They have a couple really nice players. But outside of those guys, this roster needs a lot of work. So I think it would be a mistake, especially since you just drafted a receiver 4th overall. I think they're out. The Lions, no chance in hell they'll do this, because they paid Amon-Ra St. Brown. Before Justin Jefferson got paid, St. Brown was the highest paid receiver in the history of the NFL, and they also have Jamison Williams. They have Reynolds. They got the 2 running backs. I think there's no chance in hell. And again, the 49ers probably don't want to send them to a team that they're probably going to see in the playoffs like they did in the NFC title game. The Raiders, again, another team, no chance in hell, because they already did the Devontae trade, and I think that they regret that. Not that Devontae has been a bad player for them. Devontae's still been really good with the Raiders. But if you don't have a guy to throw the ball to him for, what the fuck does it matter? So, and I think they honestly do regret doing the Davante Adams trade, because they gave up a lot to bring him in. He's been really good, but I think that they'd rather have the draft capital that they gave up for Davante. So I don't see the Raiders as a realistic team. And ironically enough, look at what team is next, the 49ers with $31.4 million. So the 49ers have the money to pay Brandon Aiyuk, and I think that is why Aiyuk is so frustrated, why he's holding his ground so fiercely in these negotiations. It's one thing if we're already so over the cap and all that, but you have the money. You have the money. You know how valuable I am to this team. Pay me my money. So I can get that frustration from Brandon Aiyuk, but I can also get it from the standpoint of the 49ers of, look, we know down the road we're going to have to pay Brock Purdy. That's going to happen in the next couple of years, and he's going to get – you look at what some of these other guys got. I think he's going to get in the range of what Trevor Lawrence just got, which is a ton of money. That's $50 million annually. So after you do that, you're going to be severely handicapped. I think that they're just looking down the line, knowing that they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy, knowing that they're already paying Bosa a ton. He's the highest paid, I think, defensive player ever. They just gave McCaffrey a raise. He's the highest paid running back ever. Trent Williams makes a lot. Debo makes a lot. You just got a lot of players you're paying high-end premium dollar amounts to. So it's a tough situation. We always talk about this with the big contending teams, is when you're building a Super Bowl roster, you have to make these tough decisions of who really is the vital players on this team that can help us win. Like the Chiefs, when they got rid of Tyreek Hill, everyone was probably like, well, you're not going to be the same team. How are you going to win now? You just lost one of your best players, Tyreek Hill. The year after they lose him, they win the Super Bowl. So maybe that could be a situation with the 49ers with they lose Brandon Aiyuk and then they do go on to actually use the draft capital the right way. Looking at a couple other of these teams, we're not going to go over all the ones on this list. I'll just look at a couple more real quick. The Jags at 28.5 mil. I don't see them doing this because, number one, they let Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley walk. So a guy that was already in their building, that already was familiar with their system. If they weren't willing to pay that guy, like, I forget what he got, like in the range of 20 to 25. If they weren't willing to pay a guy that was already like a member of their team, knew their scheme and all that, they were willing to let him walk. I don't see them bringing in Brandon Aiyuk, even though he's definitely a better player than Calvin Ridley, don't get me wrong. But they've shown that they don't want to, pay that for veteran receivers. They already have Christian Kirk. At the time he went there, they gave him a lot of money, and they also just used their first-round pick on Brian Thomas Jr. So I don't see the Jags as a realistic landing spot. The Packers, another team with a lot of money, 28.4, but again, I see that as very unrealistic for a couple of reasons. The Packers have one of the best young receiver cores in the NFL right now with Wicks, with Watson, with Dobbs. So you don't really lack for receivers on that team. And also, again, I don't think the 49ers are going to trade him to another really good NFC team that they could potentially see in the playoffs. And then one other team I'll throw out here that isn't on here, they're way lower down on the list, is my Steelers. I feel like Aiyuk has been linked to my Steelers a lot. It's like every time I go on Instagram, there's another rumor, Brandon Aiyuk to the Steelers, all this. And they're way down the list at $15 million. So the Steelers would have to make a couple big roster changes to get the money to bring in Brandon Aiyuk. I think that's what a lot of people are kind of misunderstanding when they're calling for the Steelers to make this trade. And also, it'd be very off-brand, very out of character for the Steelers to make a big trade like this. The last time we made a big trade for a star player was Minkah Fitzpatrick, and that was in 2018, 6 years ago. We very, very rarely make big moves for star vets. And especially at the receiver position, a position being that we develop very well. If from a fan standpoint, obviously, hell yeah, I want Brandon Aiyuk on my team, especially whenever our receiver core looks so thin. It's like George Pickens is really the only proven commodity at the wide receiver position on the Steelers. And I would love to see Brandon Aiyuk in a Steelers uniform. Hell, I'd probably get his jersey. But it's just not realistic, I don't think. I would be very, very shocked, and I would be willing to admit I'm wrong if it happens. I'd be really excited if it happens. But I think it's highly unlikely that he's a Pittsburgh Steeler for everything I just said. So, I guess I ended up rambling a lot more than I thought I would. That's kind of like the story of this channel, is just me blabbing, and I could go on forever about all this, but I'll end it off here. I do want you guys to comment down below. Let me know what you think is the best realistic landing spot for Brandon Aiyuk. Is your team one of these teams we just talked about? Would you want Brandon Aiyuk on your team? If you made it this far, really appreciate you listening to me blab. Go ahead and leave a like and subscribe.